everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today, we are going to be doing something I've been wanting to do for a long time now, but I hadn't yet found the right video to do it with. We are going to be reacting to an interview done by Soft White Underbelly. And if you haven't heard of this channel before, it is essentially focused on interviews. And the person who does it, Mark Laita, is a photographer. I believe he got started and was famous for doing portrait photography, and then also does interviews on this YouTube channel. In particular, I believe he is probably most well known for the interviews he has done with people that are experiencing homelessness, people that are living with drug addiction, things like that. So he tends to interview people that wouldn't typically be interviewed. And one other demographic that has pulled in a lot of views for him over the years would be kinky folk. And I will say, Mark Laita, who is the person behind this channel, or Laita, I'm actually not sure how it's pronounced, but whatever his last name is, he is not without his controversy. A lot of people do not like the way that he does interviews, the people that he speaks with, in terms of, are they getting paid or compensated? What is he doing? And then some people will say, oh no, he's totally good because look at what he does over here. And I honestly, don't really know what to think. I don't have a settled opinion about the guy behind this channel. I definitely have issues with some of his previous interviews because one of the things he does with kinky folk is, even if they're not somebody who has a fettuccine, can't say the word, I don't know why he says it on his channel, but he does. He has people who have fettuccines and people that are just kinky folk, and he really conflates the two experiences a lot. It doesn't really seem to be able to switch modes with the people he's interviewing. It also doesn't seem like his baseline knowledge of the communities that he's interviewing changes or grows over time. It's every single time it's he's very surprised when somebody's I do my kink non-sexually. But the reason why I picked this particular interview that we're going to listen to and watch today is because it's about a puppy player, which is completely my wheelhouse. I think it's going to be a really positive one, fingers crossed. And hopefully, if there are some awkward questions, we can maybe correct that, set the record straight. I would just love to be able to speak to Mark and just have that answered for my own sake. Why do you ask these particular questions? And why do you sound surprised? What's going on there? Anyways, I'm getting way far ahead of myself. I just wanted to make sure we had some background on the interviewer first, because I know he is contentious at the very least, at least to some corners of the internet. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to probably most of the interview. There are some interviews he does, maybe even half of them or more, where it gets into pretty dark subject matter. If that happens here, I will skip over it. If I go over anything too quickly, I will just have it linked down below. You can watch the full interview if you want to, and then also just content warning, because we're going to potentially be talking about some deeper, darker personal things here, as well as light, happy, fun, puppy play, BDSM stuff. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the video.
So what do you call this? This is called what?
So my name is Kieran Hound, and I do pup play. Pup play is within the wide world of BDSM and kink. And I'm also a human.
Yes, you are.
Harsha doggo.
So tell me about pup play. Is this a fetish?
So yes, pup play would be considered a fetish. What I love about fetish and pup play, so I think as humans, we're naturally creative, expressive people. And we've been like that for thousands and thousands of years. So pup play, while it might look different and novel and alternative to people, it's really the spirit of theater. So humans going back multiple cultures, thousands of years, have embodied the spirits of animals, whether it's in different cultures shamanically, creatively, Shakespearean, theatrical. So what I do is I take the aspects of the canine, so that's playfulness, that's loyalty, that's energetic, that's love, and I channel that through my human spirit. So I make the canine come alive through my play.
You see what I mean? Right here at the very beginning, we have the fettuccine question, and I wonder what respective definitions of fettuccine they are working with. Now, for me, and I would say for most people, I use the definition of fettuccine that is more clinical in origin, in the sense that it is a thing you need in order to be able to get off. Like, you have to be thinking about it, experiencing it, touching it, interacting with it in some way in order to achieve arousal and or orgasm. I certainly do know people that have a little bit of a looser definition of fettuccine, and it's more like synonymous with kink. I really feel like it is beneficial to have separate terms. So maybe we're meaning it more in the sense of like, oh, fettuccine is just when you have some kind of like non-normative interest, in the bedroom, like at all, in any degree. But I don't like that. And most of the time in these interviews, the answer will be like, no, it's not a sexual thing. But what is interesting to me following that is, first of all, love the energy here. Fantastic energy. Completely could be in the same room as them and like feeling the energy. I can just like tell what it is at the screen. And like, I don't think I've met them because we're in very separate parts of the country, but I feel like I know a lot of people like them that do puppy play, and they're also representing a lot of like leather culture stuff here too. And I love the description of it being a theater thing and a performance thing, because this is why I say go to multiple sources. Like, go and just watch as many things as you can and listen to as many podcasts as possible and read as many books as possible, because even if you've heard it described 3, 4, 5 times, you're still going to, every once in a while, hear a completely new way of thinking about it. And this description of it being theatrical and performative is not something that I typically would describe any kind of pet play as being. Outside of it, like any kind of role play is kind of like a production and acting, but I don't go into it with that kind of depth. So I like that we're examining this way of experiencing puppy play. Also a little bit more spiritual as well, which is not really my kink and my bag, but is true for a lot of people. I know many people that do all different kinds of role play, really, but puppy play and pet play especially, where it's a spiritual thing for them. It's connected to some kind of spiritual journey or spiritual practice, just like a way of interacting with that in a way that's comfortable. So love all of this so far, except for the fettuccine question, but let's keep going.
And it's electrifying, it's fun. As a person, I can often be very heavy and analytical and serious. We take on all this weight as people. We worry about our bills, our jobs, our responsibilities. And what does a dog do? A dog's just happy to be around.
Just wants to play.
Yeah. Like, if a dog has been treated well, hi, I just met you and I love you. Like, what's a golden retriever do? Everybody loves a dog. So for me, what I do with pup play, I consider it like emotional support pup playing. For some within our community, it's a sexual fetish. They love kind of taking on this mannerisms of like, I'm this hot, sexy dog. And that's totally valid and beautiful. There's so many ways to express ourselves. But for me, being a very heavy, serious person, when I met my first pup players, it was just like, I was really down at the time. And it was a friend of mine was just coming out to visit for school, and he's like, I met these really interesting people at this bar, and like, I'm gonna stay with them, come on over. And I knew about BDSM and kink a little bit through actually seeing pony play, which is like taking on the spirit of the horse. And I was like, I grew up with animals. I love that theatrical playfulness. But I saw these two guys that just had little dog tags on their neck. And I was like, wait, are y'all pup players? And they went from like this to like, oh my God, yes, we're pup players. Like, hi, oh my God, do you want to come hang out with us? Do you want to come to our puppy party? And I was like, what's a puppy party? And they're like, well, we get all our friends coming over and we're all pups. And anytime somebody came to the door, everybody ran to the door barking to welcome them in. I was like, it was the cutest thing I'd ever seen. And I learned there was a community for it. I learned there were contests for it where it's just like the most beautiful, silly thing. It's like taking the serious stateliness of, say, like, you know, Miss Universe or like Miss America, where like, okay, it's very vanilla-ish. You have gowns, but you know, you have the wave, you have a platform. It's taking like that structure of being a good ambassador leader, but wrapping it in with BDSM and kink community, where how do you help people bring out their own inner play and light?
It's always so interesting to hear different people's entry point into the community, and that was not exactly how I got into pet play or the scene, but I've definitely been to bars and environments like that where it's like, oh my gosh, new person, hello, come in, we're so excited to see you, like, come hang out with us. And that was something that I experienced in a different setting, but also within kink, that really got me invested into the lifestyle. I've told the story like many times before. When I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of long-term friends. I struggled making friends. I was definitely more of a loner, kind of weird kid. I mean, like, did this not clue you into that? But in any case, I had trouble making friends, and I always felt like there was something I was holding back from other people. And when I found the kink scene and people suddenly wanted to get to know me and wanted to talk to me and have these like long, deep conversations and really know me, like all of me, that was revolutionary to my whole life. I mean, I do it as a job now, right? Talking about kink. So clearly it was. But even beyond that, on a very personal level, it was such a huge difference. It was something I definitely needed at that point in my life, and I'm very glad to have been able to carry it forward to today. But I know not every community is super nice and welcoming and friendly, but so many of them are. I think also what they're saying about this being something where people assume, oh, if you're in costume and you're really dressed up, there's a really high level of performance to that, and it can seem really intimidating to want to try that for yourself. But I think being in an environment where it's so, like, not even low pressure, but like no pressure, encouraging, like how fun this is, and talking about kink being a fun thing that's about like human connection and like self-expression and togetherness. Like, I think all of those are really good values. And again, I do have a little bit of an issue with the definition / use of fettuccine that we had at the beginning here, but I think overall this is like so true for the vast majority of kink experiences that I have had and that most people I know have had as well. And yeah, it is true that like for some people it is a sex thing and for others it's not, and it's performance and happiness and self-expression and like bonding and romance, and it can really be anything that you want it to be. It doesn't have to be the same way for everyone. That's one of the many things that is so beautiful and wonderful about our community. But I could rant about that one for a while, and I have before. So let us leave that thought there and continue with this interview.
So often when we see people really dressed up, big and fancy, even if we don't understand it, I think there's always a part of us that's kind of almost like, I don't have the bravery to do that, but I kind of wish I did. But there's something interesting and pulling about it. So I think whether it's pup play or whether it's what any of us do, when we embody that joy in which we find, we kind of give permission to other people to like be creatively expressive as well. And so it's also a joy practice. It's very near and dear to my heart. It helps me alleviate anxiety. It helps me alleviate depression that I deal with. And I've just met so many beautiful, lovely people through it. And I love to talk and share about it and chase toys, because who doesn't like squeaky toys? It's great.
Well, you can't argue that there's probably not another creature on earth that is as loving and playful as dogs are.
Absolutely. And if you really consider,
if we all could be a little more like dogs, the earth would be a better place.
Yeah. And I think about too how as humans have evolved. We've evolved thousands of years alongside dogs. Like there's a reason if you actually see video of how a dog reads a person's face, like they can read points of how the human emotes. And so sometimes people, when they think of pup play, they're like, that's really weird. Like, you're not actually a dog, or you think you were born into a dog person. They're like, no. There's only so much you can tell from like trying to look at pictures on the internet to understand anything. It's a theatrical art. How I explain it to people understand what human theater is. You have an actor or an actress who understudy a character, historical, whatever. Now they don't actually think they're that person. With taking on costuming, with taking on mannerisms, roles, accents, they make that person come alive on screen, and so people suspend disbelief for a while to kind of enjoy this character. And so I do that, but with the spirit of the dog. So it doesn't have anything to do with playing with real dogs. That's a weird, shadowy side that sometimes people think. No, people don't sexualize real dogs.
I know this isn't something that Mark asked about, but I do think this is an important point to bring up to a general audience because for some reason, and I don't know why, other than like the occasional video that like somebody like Blair White makes, I don't know why people would assume this, but a lot of people are afraid that pet play is some kind of like shiny paint over on like people wanting to sexually interact with animals. I think this is actually a really, really good explanation of how it's like, yes, we are embodying this, we are studying how to do this, but we all know, in the same way that like an actor knows they're not Napoleon. Well, I guess method acting maybe. Like, okay, first of all, if we're gonna come for pet players, we need to critique the method actors, okay? Like, if what we do is a problem, what about all those news stories about method actors going way too deep with it? But that's a whole other side thing I could talk about. But anyway, what I'm trying to get to is that pet play is really misunderstood sometimes, and people assume very bizarre things about it that are simply not the case. And yes, like in any group, you will find people that are doing the bad, wrong, immoral thing. But that doesn't mean it's representative of the whole group or that is what defines the group, you know? So yeah, it's like most of us do not literally believe that we are trapped in a human body with the soul of a dog and that this is a way of like manifesting our inner truth or something. It's like, it's acting, it's fun, it's enjoyable. Being a trans dog, that's just like not a thing. Otherkin, variants, etc., those are a thing that exist, but they're not the same thing as being a pet player. So we're doing a lot of work here, and I really enjoy it. So let's go ahead and move on to more of this interview.
I grew up myself. I'm an only child, and I grew up with Akitas, Case Hounds, Dalmatians, American Eskimos. Dogs were always very much like my siblings that I never had. And I was a very kind of shy, nervous kid, and I didn't really understand how and why people peopled, but there was a calm, resolute strength and elegance and foundational power about dogs and cats and animals. So I think part of me from like a young age, I was like, I just intuitively understand this mannerism and this way of talking, because animals really, they talk to us all the time, not through English, not through words, but through their energy, their body mannerism. Yes, sometimes loud bark. They'll definitely let us know. But there's something very pure about that I love that people intuitively connect with as well.
Is it just a way of like connecting and playing with others that's a little more like in the style of a dog, that it's just more kind of free and open and
foundationally for me, yes.
Because as you said earlier, it's not sexual.
It's not sexual.
It is for some, but not
absolutely
not for you.
And it's, to me also, it very much depends on how you can define sexual. You know, in the U.S., we live in a very sex-phobic culture. So some people will see somebody showing a little bit of shoulder and be like, that's really risque. That's very sexual. It's just a shoulder. All the way scanning to, okay, well, you have penetrative sex in porn. It really depends on how somebody defines it. So outfits themselves, like gear, is not always sexual. And I would actually say it depends on the person, how they're expressing themselves. So yes, so being a part of the pup community, which is a subsect of BDSM and kink, it also has much foundational history in the LGBTQ queer community. Kink has been a radical way of kind of taking back ownership of very creative sexuality and creative expression. And it's also important for like me to honor that history. It's yes, people make it their own, but there's also a lot of tradition in this. Like we go back to the dog's personality. Dogs also usually have jobs. They've evolved along people. They love being of service. You know, you have working dogs, you have search and rescue dogs, you have service dogs. And pups, or pup players, or pups as they're known, often have like a long history. Some people can be in power exchange relationships with partners. So say like they might have an owner or a master or a dom, just totally depends on the person. Me personally, I've just loved kind of being a community service pup. So I've never had an owner partner. I just kind of like to be that, almost like if there was a big party of people, I'm kind of like the house dog, or I just like to go up to everybody, kind of maybe beg for snacks. But, you know, I'm not owned by anyone.
This is something I'm really glad to see representation for, because it's not something I see discussed like online or in other interviews basically ever. And yeah, like you don't have to have a partner to do any kind of BDSM really, except for maybe power exchange kind of. But especially with pet play, you don't have to have a partner. It's very community supported in a way that I think goes beyond even what other types of BDSM would have for community support. And I know a lot of people, like especially let's say like 4 or 5 years ago, there were a lot of common definitions that people were using where like kitten play, pony play, puppy play were all defined as being forms of power exchange where you are taking on the role of a pet as a submissive in a power exchange relationship with one other person. That is a very limited definition. I'm very glad that we are having examples that are not even like considering that as being a thing, as like you have to do it this way. And now you can see how much variety there is. And actually, I hadn't really quite connected the job thing yet, but with the history of the gay men's leather community and like how that was really the place where not only just like North American BDSM culture started as a whole, but where puppy play started, there's that history of like military background and militarism overall. And I can see how that would maybe influence the path that pup play would go on in particular. I don't normally call it pup play, but we're using the language of the video. My brain says puppy play, but they're all really the same thing at the end of the day. So don't worry about it too much. But yeah, and like just being a service community person, like I know a couple people, I feel like every scene has people like this where like you don't really ever see them play one-on-one with people. They don't really have partners, but they're always there at events and they just love helping and love like organizing stuff and getting the snacks and running the registration desk and doing all that, and they're just like happy to be part of the community, not as like a lesser thing, but as like a different way of interfacing with the community. I think this is something that makes kink really friendly to people that are maybe aromantic or asexual too, where like if you don't want to have those kinds of like physical or romantic interactions that maybe you would associate with certain types of kink play, or that would just feel something you didn't want to do, you can be in the kink scene and be a participant in the community and like not necessarily like do scenes or have a partner and just like enjoy being with your friends and with your group of folks that you enjoy being around. And like that is all it really has to be. So love this. Again, I could ramble, but let's go ahead and continue.
So you have get-togethers with other pup players?
Yes. In LA, we're very fortunate to have a very rich community. So at different bars and gatherings, there's ways that people congregate and come together to kind of just be on the understanding level. There's so many different types of hoods. So there was like the hood that I was wearing earlier. There's many different styles. Some people love the anonymity of it. They just really want to get into that headspace where nobody knows who they are outside of a bar space, and that's awesome.
So they keep the face covering on.
Right, yeah. And I think, and that's beautiful because, we have to be real that still a lot of this alternative expression of sexuality can put some people at risk. There's a lot of people that say, like, if they work in like very, very conservative industries or conservative families, sees this as something so weird and deviant and dangerous that like maybe they're not safe. Now, obviously, this is gross, like way out there, gross overgeneralization, but people have to meet themselves where they're comfortable.
Now, your earlier comparison of comparing this to an actor on a stage, what's the difference?
Exactly. So for me, when I do pup play, it's just like another beautiful hobby of mine. So say like if somebody really loves the LA Dodgers and they love getting out on Dodger blue and they love going to the games and they're just crazy fan and they have little favorite players, they're probably not in that outfit all the time. They have a job, they have, RuPaul famously said, like, we're all born naked and the rest is drag. These are all costumes, different costumes. And so I don't live 24/7 doing this. It's a joy practice. I love bicycling. I do fire spinning. I go to Burning Man events. I love how we as humans just creatively can dress and take on a whole different persona. So it's a different way to spark deep conversations with people. And I mean, look at nature documentaries. If all the animals in the world were all colored the same and dressed the same, it'd be so boring. But whenever you think you might be too weird, just watch like a deep sea documentary and see the things that come out of the water. And you're like, I haven't even begun to be weird. I'm just getting started. I'm just going to take notes from the things that come out of the deep and be like, oh man, I could never be that weird. But
I think I'm going to have to steal that term, joy practice. I really like that. I think that is a good way of describing participation in BDSM as being something that is like one item amongst the whole list of things that you are as a person. And I don't think this, like, we don't have enough vanilla media with kink representation in it at all to, like, have this be a larger problem, but I do think there is a tendency to see BDSM and even talk about BDSM as being this, like, all-consuming aspect of who you are. It's your whole life. Like, when somebody is kinky, like, they are kinky. Like, everything now is infused or part of or influenced by kink. And, like, for some people, they totally want that and they love it. Like, it's all kink all the time, baby. And that's also valid. Like, maybe it would just help it click for people who don't really understand that it's not always a sex thing and they don't really get why. And, like, people aren't necessarily going to understand why it could be enjoyable to dress up as, like, a dog or a pony or a doll or anything. And to me, that's honestly, it's a little bit sad. Like, I feel sad for people that can't imagine that for, like, anyone being joyful or fun. And I think that just goes to show, like, how much some people have, like, a hard cutoff between, like, childhood enjoyment and imagination play and creativity and their adult selves and their adult lives. And not that you have to be a creative person or that, like, everyone has to do that for their whole lives, but I think this is something that people tend to really like about kink, is it's a safe space to be able to explore those elements that are typically left behind in childhood that can just as easily be part of your adult life, that are fun and creative and expressive, like make-believe play, like dress-up play. And yeah, anyways, I don't really know how I got off on that tangent, but let's talk about jobs.
You have a job?
I do.
You have a fairly conventional life outside of this?
I do, yes. I went to college. I have a BA in communications. I was a newspaper journalist for many years. What actually really helped me being interested in communications and journalism was I feel like animals raised me in a lot of ways. Like I started understanding energy and how people use their body language. I'm like, okay, I understand that. But the understanding how to deeply relate with people being able to interview so many different people in very small towns across Georgia was like, oh, wow, okay. It actually, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what type of job title you have or how much money you have. If you're currently experiencing homelessness, if you're currently the mayor, or there's a deep energy within us all that we really just want to be feeling safe. We want to be accepted. We want to be celebrated. We want to be validated by people. And when I kind of started learning that, especially in my early 20s, before I learned about kink, before I knew anything, that I was like, there's something really soft and special about this, that it's easy for people to forget when we get in our little bubble of like, this is my job title, this is my name, this is what I do, I can't deviate outside this bubble. It's like, you still can. That energy that we have of, you know, this is who I am, it's not defined by our name, by our job title. We're much larger than that in the cosmos. And so I can get very philosophical about pup play.
Well, Kieran, what was your childhood like? How'd you grow up?
Well, when an egg meets a sperm.
After that?
Yes, after that. So
I'm not sure how much of this last little bit I'm gonna leave in. It got pretty intense. I am gonna try to leave in what I think are the most relevant bits for our discussion, and then if you want to see all of it, content warning included, you can go watch the full video down below. But I think the core of what I got out of that was the message of compassion, even in the face of things that are so difficult to be compassionate about, and to not be judgmental, and to look for love and understanding, even in places where that's very, very hard to do. And within the kink community, this is something that's very controversial to talk about. So I do want to bring this point up as well. It's just like very much this back and forth of like, oh, like kink is caused by like childhood trauma. Only people that are like messed up in the head want to do kink. And I know in the past, I definitely made a lot of points about how that's like not true, how there's not a correlation there, how people that do BDSM are just as mentally well as like non-kinky folk, and you know, all the research basically that's like worthwhile to look at, that's quality research, demonstrates that over and over again. But recently, for a different video, I was doing research about specifically the question of like childhood trauma and kink. And though there aren't many studies looking at this, there is one which, to be fair, it's not a statistically like significant difference, but there is a small one where people that have experienced physical abuse as children have like a couple of percentage points like more of a chance of being into kink. Like the way, that's not maybe the best way of phrasing it, but basically like non-kinky people were like 11%, and then like people that participated in kink were like between like 13 to like 17% or something, like chance of having physical abuse during childhood. And it's definitely something that can be a way to cope with it, like using kink as a way to cope with those things, or like find a container to explore those things, or to like with this individual, what they're doing with, okay, I have this like guiding light of like, what would a dog do, basically, which is, I'm laughing a little bit because it's like so wholesome, and I love that so much. But yeah, like what would a dog do? And then being that space for other people in the way that you wish you would have had it, like the emphasis on community service, like all that's so positive. And the vast majority of people have what would be termed like an intrinsic interest in kink, where it's something that's like coming from within the self. And then a smaller, maybe like less than a quarter of people have interests that are primarily deriving from external factors, which would include things like experiencing, trauma in childhood. And it's like about, I want to say like 10%, somewhere around there. So kind of the studies seem to be more or less in the same ballpark area. Like 10% of people will assign their interest in kink to some sort of external factor involving childhood trauma, and like that being a motivator. So absolutely, if you're somebody that has had trauma in childhood, you are welcome in our community. You are valid. I worry a little bit that sometimes we've gone too far around the other way to be like, oh no, we're not weird, and like we would never, like we're all normal. And it's like, there's nothing to be ashamed about if you've experienced trauma. Like, living in the modern age, most of us at some point in our lives will experience some kind of traumatic event, because I think kink is a space where a lot of people feel very safe to explore things and talk about things that they don't like have space for in everyday life, whether that be struggling with chemical dependency or addiction or alcoholism, or having trauma from past experiences. Those can be things that we have support for in our community. And again, it goes back to being your whole self and your whole person around other people. And for me, I found that in kink, and I think a lot of other people do as well. So beautiful, but heavy message. We have a couple minutes left here, so let's go ahead and to slide through home base, I guess. I don't know why I picked a sports analogy there, but I did, and see where we end things on.
We have that same intuitive sense in us as people, but oftentimes, because of trauma or our big brains, we'll talk ourselves out of it, but we end up paying the price. How many times have you had a feeling that I'm not feeling quite right about it, but I'll do it anyway, and then you regret it? That's because of a pattern that you learned in childhood in which you weren't safe and you weren't validated, so you had to suppress that. Dogs remind us in a way that we don't have to suppress that. We can be authentic and true to ourselves. And a seminal person it's funny, not in the kink world, but Dr. Gabor Mate, who speaks beautifully eloquent about the nature of trauma, human development, has so inspired me to look at the world differently like that. So it's not really a kink counselor, but I would say a lot of people who do kink and pup play are so curious about just like the nature of themselves that they want to get deep into relationship with people and communications to get really, ultimately it's about reconnecting to ourselves through being open with other people. And dogs are the most perfect example of that. They just want love. They are love. And I think they remind us that really at our core, no matter how many flaws that we've picked up, flaws that we think we have, that we've picked up along the way, they remind us that we're also love. And that's what I want to embody in the world. And I'm grateful for everyone who's also shined the light with me when I get sad and I'm like a sad puppy. My community, they pick me up and they remind me of that. And when I'm just around dogs, it's just like happy ruffle on the head, and I'm like, it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And that's what I love.
Beautiful. All right, Kieran, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate it. And we'll love ourselves and we'll go out and love the world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dog is love is such a beautiful sentiment to end this on. I'm almost like afraid to say anything else that'll like take away from that beautiful moment of like dogs being love. And like I'm looking at my dog, she's like laying on my bed right now as I'm filming this, just like snoozing away, having a great time. And yeah, I think I feel personally very moved by this. I don't know if anyone else is feeling that way. Having heard this interview, maybe me interspersing my thoughts between it has taken away from that to some extent. I don't know. Maybe, hopefully, it's added more to it. But it really all keeps going back to kink being this great potential for community support and self-exploration and introspection and growth and having a safe place to do that growth in, and having a place to get that support from. And I think like if you've been waiting for a time to go out and explore the kink community and see what it's really like, and to meet people and maybe to make some friends and have a place to go to once a month, once a week, a couple times a year even, also totally okay. Maybe this is your sign to go out and be brave and try and go do it, because it can be such a huge positive thing for so many people's lives. And yeah, dog is love. That's I think where we're gonna end it today, y'all. Thank you so much for watching this interview with me, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it alongside mine in the comment section down below. What did you think about this? Do you watch other interviews from this channel? Any other ones you want me to react to? There's one I'm going to recommend in particular that is with a submissive. I will have linked down below if you want to check it out. That one is just like, you are my people. This is exactly anyone who wants to know what the most stereotypical submissive I could, like, not in a negative way, but just like you feel like, what is the personality of somebody who is a submissive in the BDSM scene? The interview with that person, I wish I remembered the name right now. I want to say it starts with an M, but I don't want to guess and get it wrong. So they had a beautiful interview, so fantastic. I recommend you go and listen to it. Go ahead and check it out if you want to. But if you like this and you want to see more from me, you can go ahead and subscribe. I make videos twice a week about all sorts of different kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. A link to that will be down below. If you do already support me there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.